grownfolksmusic.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are back once again, or if you haven't been, you're back once or whatever. But anyway, another GFM Spotlight interview, and today we are very, very lucky to have what I would what's a good term? A Renaissance woman, many talents. None other, than we're talking songwriter, we're talking production, we're talking writing, journalism. It's a whole thing. PR. So we want to welcome to the spotlight none other than Rhonda Nicole. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here, Ivan. Thank you for inviting me to come on.
Such a pleasure. And I am one of these begin at the beginning kind of people. Like I know life is not linear like that, but I'm like, well, we start somewhere. So can you tell us a little bit about some of your beginnings and how you got maybe lead us to how you got involved in the many facets of entertainment that you've been involved in.
Woo! You're right. It's not linear. But I'll try to condense it as much as possible. I was born and raised in Dallas, and pretty much from day one on this earth, I've been musical. So kind of our family lore is that when my parents brought me home from the hospital, my dad laid me in my crib and turned on an easy listening station, and that was kind of for a very long time growing up, that was kind of his thing. Like he would turn on soft music for me to listen to. And that was all a great idea until they gave me my own record player and my own records. And then I'd be in my room at night doing the most, like in my Jungle Book and my other Disney records and not going to sleep. And there would occasionally be a go to bed, Rhonda. Right. So it's like, you guys had this great idea. But I've really been musical and entertainment drawn from the very beginning. And I think that my parents picked up on that really early on. My dad, in particular, was a musician. He was never a musician professionally, but being from New Orleans, he grew up playing music himself. He was in marching bands. He did all kinds of things. And I don't really know if he had professional music aspirations, but he definitely was very focused on it. And then my mother was just a lover of music. She never sang or anything like that, but we always had music in the house. And I've had a very early exposure to the arts. And so from childhood, from literally first grade, I started taking piano lessons. I was in choir. And then around, I think, sixth grade, we had a band in elementary school, and I convinced my parents to let me be in band, and I started playing alto sax.
Nice.
And from there, I started getting even more into like musical theater and theatrical performance, straight theater, musical theater, and eventually wound up at the Booker T. Washington High School for Performing and Visual Arts in Dallas, which is the alma mater of Erykah Badu, Norah Jones, people way more famous than I would probably ever be, but a really, really good fine arts education in a public school setting. So I'm always very grateful, getting chills now thinking about my beloved arts magnet. And I started writing my own song lyrics when I was about 12 and singing and all of that kind of stuff. And by the time I got to college, I was starting to also get into other things away from being talent, from being a performer. And that's where I started to get into the journalism, the filmmaking. And I studied television and radio at SMU in Dallas. And then from there, my first gig right out of college was with Disney. The Walt Disney Studios here in Los Angeles have a phenomenal program called well, it's a fellowship program. I don't know what it's called now, but at the time it was the Disney Touchstone Writing Fellowship Program.
Yeah.
So at that time, I thought I wanted to be a filmmaker,
Oh, wow.
and I'd applied to film school and didn't get into film school, but I
Yeah.
got this job instead.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, well, they're going to pay me to do what I was about to pay somebody else to teach me to do. So clearly,
Hey.
right? It's like that's a no brainer. So I did that for a year because it was a year long fellowship, and then I didn't know what to do with myself because I still had this vision of being a singer and doing all this, creative. I'm going to be on stage and I'm going to tour. And even though I had been here in Los Angeles, I really didn't know what to do or how to do it.
Mhm.
And so I went back to Dallas.
Wow.
And as soon as I got back to Dallas, I was like, oh, I should have just. But then after about a year of being in Dallas, my parents being like, what are you going to do with your life? I came out as a singer, meaning that I told my parents, I really want to do music. And they kind of looked at me and they're like, just figure it out. And a few nights later, my dad sent me or called me and said, hey, I saw this job listing because they used to look in the newspaper for jobs for me.
I understand
For
that.
right, for they're having these auditions tomorrow in Dallas for Universal Studios Japan. And I was like, first of all, Dad, I didn't say anything about going to Japan. Like, I was kind of having a bit of an attitude. He was like, look, you're the one who said you want to sing. They're looking for singers. Just go. And so I did, and they hired me on the spot. I sang I Don't Want to Be Alone Tonight from School Days.
Yeah.
And
The gamma rays.
Yeah. And so I was off to Japan. That was my first professional singing gig. And after that, everything just began to sort of evolve. But just to kind of get to the point, I've always maintained some kind of a musical career with everything else. When I came back from Japan, I maybe about a year or so after I got back, after another little stint of some weird jobs that had nothing to do with much of anything, I started singing with the person who became my music partner, this brother named Montrose Cunningham in Dallas. He asked me to join his band. And ultimately, we wound up performing together for about 10 years. And at the same time, I started working for the Tom Joyner morning show. I was Tom Joyner's personal and executive assistant. So for about a decade, there little, give or take a few months, I ran Tom's business.
Wow.
And I then get off work and go play at clubs.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, and so I've always tried. I tell people all the time that from the perspective of being a singer and a songwriter, the things that I've wanted have not materialized yet. But I've never stopped. I've never stopped writing. I've never stopped recording. I have stopped performing mostly because things just kind of I needed to take a step back and do some reevaluating. But but I continue to push for it, and the dream never dies. And thankfully, I've been able to parlay my degree and my other experiences into this second career as a digital marketing and social media marketing consultant and strategist. So that's what I'm doing now, and in addition to working on music.
Wow, I love
Yes.
it. Yeah, no, that's just I'm just like thinking about just visualizing your journey, and just thinking about how many points that I've watched so many people just stop. Like this happened, and everyone has their, it's not me judging whether somebody stops or not, but it's just a testament just to see that it's like, yeah, I'm doing this, but I'm always doing, the music. And so that's just, that's, so I wanted to ask you a little bit about, because I know you're involved with a pretty, pretty inspirational project. as far as digital media is concerned. Can you tell us a little bit about the museum and what's happening there?
Yes. So I was blessed with the opportunity to be brought on as part of the digital marketing team for the National Museum of African American Music. It is based in Nashville. It is not based in Nashville. It is physically in Nashville. Goes to suggest that it can move. And it's opening in September, and it is the first of its kind comprehensive museum experience that tells the entire story of Black music, and literally starting in the 1600s
Hmm.
all the way through today. It's been an incredible journey. I am the social media director, so I'm responsible for building out all the social media strategy and implementing that strategy and reevaluating and revamping it, which has been, an incredible trip in and of itself, because we're dealing with a space that isn't open yet,
Mhm.
and so telling that story, building the anticipation, getting people to follow the social handles and to get excited about it has been very rewarding because the reaction and the response has been all that we wanted it to be. I'm excited about it as well because it goes so in depth. So it's an experience that if you're a diehard music fan, music nerd, you like to crate dig, read liner notes, all the kinds of details that you look for when you're that kind of a music consumer will be there.
Mm.
But also, if you just like music and you just like to, pop your fingers and, rock back and forth or what have you, you can still enjoy the experience because it's not so deep and so esoteric as to turn away the people who are just want to kind of get more of an overview experience.
Mm.
So I'm excited to try to experience it live in person. After all these months of reading about what's going to happen and working with this brilliant curatorial team that ethnomusicologists who just have so much knowledge. It's just
Right.
like, but it's going to be quite an experience, and I think that like I said, it's something that doesn't exist. Other music museums either focus on a particular era or a particular label or a particular genre. And NAMAM, as we call it, is going to be, the hub, the heart and soul of all of those experiences when it opens.
Wow. I'm excited because I'm one of those nerds. So it's
Yes,
just, it's
me too. Me
yeah,
too.
yeah. So that, but this is not your first experience with a legacy or with the legacy of Black music.
No,
You did some work with another famous part of our history, a big train of sorts, right?
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
I did. I was the managing editor for SoulTrain.com from about 2011 to 2016 when the site went away. And again, that was amazing. I started that journey a little bit by accident, although I guess there really are no accidents. At the time, two of my very good friends were running digital for Soul Train. They had been responsible for sort of rebranding the site so that it was a little bit more in alignment with what was happening in that part of the 2000s,
Mhm.
but also refreshing the brand while still keeping it true to Don Cornelius's vision. And they called me one night and they were like, we're just looking for some folks to do some additional writing. And they had asked me about interviewing a particular artist. They had initially asked me if I could just connect them with their management. So I was like, okay. So I did that. And then they were like, actually, why don't you just do the interview and the article? So I did that. And then they were like, actually, why don't we give you a whole column? And so they developed the artist to artist column for me, where I, as a singer, songwriter, and independent artist, could interview anybody I wanted to. They were like, whoever you want to talk to. So that was dope. I talked to like Michael Franti was my first interview. I talked to Michelle and Cello, Nika Costa, um, Oh my gosh, so many. Alice Smith, Malibu, it goes on. And Betty LaVette, just tons of artists. I interviewed Jill Jones, F Deluxe. Never got to Prince, unfortunately, but I felt like I was close,
He's
getting
close.
close. Right? I keep interviewing all these people that worked with him, so at some point I'm going to get him, but that didn't happen. And then maybe a few months after I started the column, there was a little bit of a shift in personnel, and I was asked to come on board as the managing editor in the meantime. And eventually, it just became more or less a permanent thing. The powers that be within Soul Train Holdings and so forth at the time were like, "Hey, we like what she's doing. We've got some great content. We had some amazing writers, and all of us were spaced out across the planet. One writer was actually in the UK. Everybody else was here in the US, but scattered, and they just kept cranking out phenomenal content. So it was a really, really beautiful experience. We were very shocked and sad when it went away suddenly, and definitely feel like it's a brand that we need now. But but it isn't available to us the way that it was. But we're grateful that we had it, and of course, there's tons of old Soul Train stuff on YouTube. So there's
I've,
just not an actual
right,
digital home for
right. Yeah, I've heard of, I've seen a few clips. No,
it.
that's
Yeah,
something else. Yeah, I nerd out on. So you mentioned a very, very important artist, and that's in fact how I uh, became aware of you through a connection to um, the one and only. Can you tell us a little bit about your your thoughts on Prince? Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, wow. He's my favorite
Mm,
artist. I became aware of Prince, so I'm Gen X, and I'm fortunate enough to have been alive early in his career from the beginning. I was 3 when his first album came out. I didn't know about him then, obviously, but by the time Controversy came around, I had started to hear his music because my older sister would be playing it on her radio. And so, like, I remember walking around singing "Catch Up with Me" because that's what everybody was saying. And she was like, "Not saying," and I'm like, "Whatever it is, what I'm singing."
right.
Um, and then, like a lot of other people, 1999 era was kind of really the entry point. Um, again, miss singing the words of Little Red Corvette. I was singing Mean Red Corvette. And I distinctly remember being in like, that was 81. So it was like kindergarten, first grade, and singing it at school. Anyway, whatever. And by the time we get to Purple Rain, I kind of remember being a diehard Michael Jackson, all things
Mm,
MJ. And then I look up and I see this guy who's really cute and his band who's got girls in it, and the girls seem like they're cool. And here I am, like a young artist blossoming, um, always interested in music. And I'm like, hey, look at those girls. And of course, I had Diana Ross and all of these other women performers, but there was something a little bit more accessible, I think, about Prince of the Revolution at that time. And I just became a purple nerd at like 9. There were a lot of arguments with my parents about what I was listening to, and I remember kind of trying to sell it to my dad as I'm just listening to the music because I really was. There were so many things that Prince talked about early on that I didn't know what he was saying. Like I'm 45 now, and sometimes I'm like, oh, all these years later, I'm like, oh, that's what that is. Cool. Um, but he just captured my imagination, and the music really captured my imagination. So, like so many um, fam and Purple Army folks, there was a lot of time spent laying on the floor with speakers way too close to my ears, records playing, listening, and really, for me, getting pulled into this sonic experience that I did not have with any other artist. And I mean, there are tons of other artists that I listen to. New Edition, Michael Jackson, Olivia Newton-John's my girl. Um, but Prince just was always the one that really fascinated me. And because of Prince, I decided to try to learn to play the saxophone. I mean, I saw Eric Leeds and I was like, wow, that's cool. Maybe I can learn how to play sax and I can play saxophone or whatever.
Yeah.
So, he just was such a tremendous source of inspiration for me as an artist, but then also just as a music lover. There were so many interesting moments that got me grounded, moments that, but also like one of the things that I used to wish I could say to him if I had ever met him was, I got in trouble a lot because of you. Got lots of privileges. You're nasty behind. Um, but in all seriousness, I do feel very fortunate to have been around in the earlier years and then to have stuck around through those years after the pop culture uh, interest waned because there was so much incredible music that he put out in the 90s and of course through the very end, that I'm grateful now people are getting a chance to hear, rediscover, or discover for the first time. And to be one of those people, it's like, oh yeah, I heard that already, but welcome.
Right.
Welcome to the playground. Join us.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
it's a wonderful playground with wonderful people, and glad
it
you were,
is.
you know, were able to share that, because it's cool. It's a different thing. Um,
Yeah.
but I want to know, and I'm sure folks want to know. Let's talk about your music. So
Okay.
yeah, and one of the things that I've always been impressed by is that, just watching you work, is that you have the music, but you also understand that, a big part of that is still the business part of
Hmm.
the music. So could you, yeah, just give us a little insight on, you know, um, maybe even some advice for folks out there who are embarking on, the indie artist journey, and some things that, they may want to think about, or, you know, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty of your music. But yeah, just, yeah.
Sure. Woo. Well, to start, as far as advice, one thing that I would say is that I always had the dream and the vision and the idea, but not a whole lot of information. And that is partially just because of, I think, the time, but also just because I didn't really have anybody that I was immediately connected to who was doing music professionally. My brother is a musician and he's done a lot, but he's always had a parallel career doing something else. Excuse me. So I would say from an advice perspective is, especially now that there's so much technology and so many touch points. You've got social media, you have, all of these different organizations, whether it's a PRO, like, ASCAP or BMI or Recording Academy, or just, any number of spaces where you can gain information about how to create music. Um, so that's one thing I would say. I think the thing that has kept me from quitting, to your point earlier, is being willing to pivot.
Mm,
I got
mhm,
to a point when I decided to pursue music full time. This was in like 2011. And so I decided to leave my cushy, well paying job in Dallas
mm,
with the top morning show and pursue music full time and focus on that. So I moved to the Bay Area, to do that. Why I chose the Bay Area is mostly more romantic than anything else. I just really liked it. But I also felt like it had a really dope music scene, and it felt like it was a more welcoming scene, and it absolutely was. Um, but unfortunately, after about a year and a half of pursuing music full time there, I had been in a band there as a background vocalist, and they um, asked me to leave. Which was a very strange and hurtful experience. And it sent me kind of in a spiral of, okay, I must, I've been doing this for 10 years, but I must not be as good as I thought. And I don't have the talent and I don't have the look and I don't have whatever. So I quit singing, like literally stopped singing for a minute. I wasn't performing and I would barely practice because I was just like, I was so stunned. But at the same time, what started to happen was that I was paying closer attention to things like building a career as a songwriter and having the opportunity to, because I had done, the live performance and the constant gigging for 12 years at that point. So I was like, maybe that's all that was supposed to be.
Right.
But I've been writing songs, since I was a kid, and I've got all these songs and I keep writing. So there might be something else. And so because I was willing to set aside what I thought was supposed to be, it at least allowed me to keep going. I still have not gotten where I want to be, but I keep going because I let it become something like, you know what? All right, I know that I can do shows. I know that I can sing. I know that I can get up on stage, whatever. But I also know that I can write, and there are opportunities to write for the artists. There are opportunities to have music that I've already written and recorded, placed in music, movies, and so forth. So being willing to be flexible, and to allow your talent and your dream and your gift to give you momentum, as opposed to feeling like you have to do one thing one way forever. I think that has sustained a lot of artists. That's kept a lot of people from quitting and kept a lot of people from giving up on the dream of being professional musicians in some capacity. As far as my own music,
Yes.
I released my first EP in 2010, called Nuda Veritas, that I recorded with my music partner Montrose, whose band I was in Dallas. We started recording that thing in like 2004, 2006, and then didn't even put it out till 2010 because we had full-time jobs and other stuff. But the cool thing was that because I had a full-time job, this kind of predates like crowdsourcing and all of that a little bit. So it didn't even occur to me to like try to raise money, but I had a job, so I could pay for everything that I needed to do. Our studio time, well, we recorded in his home studio, but we had to go and, take that stuff to the money to, mix and master. So all of those things, building my website, all the little marketing details, I was able to finance myself, which was pretty cool. Getting CDs pressed because again, we're predating everything being digital by just a smidge. But then I also had no idea how to really market it. So, we did gigs, which was wonderful because we could sell CDs there. And I sent CDs to, radio stations and stuff. And I got on to a local station in Dallas called KXT, which is devoted to playing Texas artists. So that was really awesome. I remember to this day, I was driving down Preston Road in Dallas, and all of a sudden I heard my song, and I was like, "Oh!" And I like pulled over, and I screamed, and I started crying. I called my mom. She's like, "What happened?" I was like, "I'm on the radio."
That's right. On the radio. Yeah.
That don't let anybody ever tell you that that's not an amazing experience, even if it only happens once.
It is.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And I, like I mentioned before, continuing to write and record, and always with the idea that I would put something else out. And here we are in 2020, and I just put out another EP in March called Radical Ecstasy. And I had been, a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with another musician friend of mine, and he was like, you can always reimagine what you've already done. Artists do that all the time, and you should toy with some of the songs that you recorded for your first EP and see if you can turn them into something else. And it started out just like as a little challenge, something to do when I got off work. This is when I was living in Vegas. And all of a sudden I started kind of experimenting with making quote unquote dance music, which is not really my forte. But I was like, well, what if I take this beat and put it here and oh, that's kind of fun. Um, and so I decided with the whole global pandemic thing that I wanted to just put something out. And I was like, I don't know if this seems, a little bit ridiculous because I have no audience, but I'm gonna put this EP out anyway of these dance remixes. And so the EP contains two songs from my first EP, Mia and Soul Lover, which was like the single from Nuda Veritas, which played on the radio, and then two newer songs that I had written, Human and Healer. And I put that out. So it's on everything. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music, it's on Google, it's on Amazon, it's everywhere. Everywhere you can stream and download. And I am presently also working on a full length album, which has been in the works for a while, called Love and Water. And that's what my brother and I are working on together. I wrote all the songs, I recorded everything, all the instruments. And it is more of a thematic project that contains songs that I've written pretty much in the last 10 or 11 years, starting, well, not starting with, but kind of at the tail end of 2009, top of 2010, when I lost my eldest sister to suicide.
Mm.
So I've taken a lot of the material that I've written that I kind of realized was all this long exploration of grief and loss and love and all of that. And I was like, these will be the songs for that album. And at some point it'll come out. I was hoping for 2020, but 2020 has a lot of things up its sleeve. And I think all of us at this point are like, you know what? We'll get to it.
Right.
Let's just get through Friday,
Right.
June 26th, and then we'll see what happens the next day.
Oh,
So.
man. That is so true. You know, there's something else. This is kind of funny. It's sort of a tangent, but it's not really a tangent because I think I think what comes out in our music is definitely a lot of who we are. But I must make this confession to you that uh, you are one of the coolest people that I've ever admired, checked out, that has the affinity. Oh, you're welcome. That you have the affinity for the pink and green, and I think that's
Yes.
that's awesome.
I'm proud Alpha Kappa Alpha woman. Yes,
Yes.
I am.
Yeah. I think that is awesome.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, I come from a family of other colors, but hey.
Well, I come from a family of multiple colors. So my eldest sister, the one who passed away, was an AKA, and my other sisters is a Delta. My dad was a Q.
Yeah.
We have several. I mean, I don't know if we have any Zetas in our family, but we're pretty evenly spread
Oh, I
throughout
see.
throughout my family across the entire D9 spectrum. So
I
maybe
heard
Zetas
that.
and I are the only place where we're not represented. But
Wow.
yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I just like having fun. But so oh, and another thing, or one other thing is you are fluent in French. Is that correct?
Oui, je le parle français.
Oui, mais oui, I don't know. I don't know.
Yes, I am. I studied French. I started studying French. Well, I got into my obsession with France and Paris started, of course, under the cherry moon, naturally. And in sixth grade, I wrote a little term paper about the Eiffel Tower, and I said at the end of the paper that one day I was going to go to Paris and live there, and I did. I studied there while I was in college, and I lived there for a semester.
Yeah.
And it was so funny because the teacher, my sixth grade teacher, had reached out to me on Facebook a few years ago, and she was like, "Do you remember when you said in your term paper?" And I was like, "You remember that?" Because
Oh,
I
right.
don't. Um, right, but yeah, I started studying French in ninth grade, and decided to just stick with it.
Mm.
And it was my college minor, and I studied abroad and go to Paris when I can. I think the last time I was there was 2013
Wow.
for a few days, putzing around, eating and doing stuff. But I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. I love speaking the language. I don't get to do it much anymore, but I try when I can to find somebody to have conversations with in French.
Oh, that's so cool. Well, I'll have to I'll make something up and I'll say, hey, this needs a beautiful French spoken word parts in the middle here for 8 bars. I know who to call.
Yes.
Yeah. So, for folks who want to, keep up with your journey and support the music and all things Rhonda Nicole, where's the best place that we can, do that or places? Yeah.
Ooh, so of course I'm on social media. Um, my my Facebook page, my music page, and my Instagram are both at Rhonda Nicole Music. And then my Twitter handle is at Rhonda Nicole underscore because music was taken, so there's
Boo.
somebody else out there. Um, but it's cool. It's cool. I'm just kidding. And then I'm on SoundCloud, so soundcloud.com/Rhonda Nicole.
Okay.
And where else? And then, like I said, my music itself, Nuda Veritas, and then my latest project, Radical Ecstasy, are on CD Baby. That was the other one I meant to mention. CD Baby, um, Apple Music, Spotify, Tidal, everywhere. So you can find me. Um, I am. I try to share as much of myself as I can on social.
Oh,
Sometimes I'm afraid I might do too much,
oh
but
no.
no, if you're cool and you want to follow me, I'd love to have you, and I'll follow back and get to know each
Yeah,
other.
well, I cannot tell you, or thank you enough for just agreeing to do this with us.
I
And
appreciate that,
oh no,
and you
this is
guys.
no, this is fun for us because we just, it's just all about when you see folks out here doing great work. You want to support that. You want to provide whatever platform you have. So,
Thank
so
you.
thank you.
grownfolksmusic.com